On today's Locked On Texans podcast, we are digging into Diggs. Hey, Stefon Diggs is a Houston Texan, right? We'll be talking a lot about how he impacts the team on and off the field, the culture. But I remember a conversation Cody and I had a couple of days ago, and it went a little like this.
$31 million. So that only leaves one realistic option. Could the Houston Texans actually trade for, let's say, one of the most disgruntled wide receivers in the league right now, and Stefon Diggs, who for this upcoming season has a salary cap of $18.5 million? Just throwing it out there. Who knows?
I think you don't make this move for a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Cody, I think this move is a move for the Texans to address the wide receiver position, which they've tried to do before in the past, right? With the Keenan Allen, didn't work out, didn't fall through. And so this is a team that understands, regardless of how we address the draft, which we'll talk about how to handle the draft moving forward, we got to get a playmaker in here.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Texans fans across the great state of Texas, the great city of Houston,
across the world, across the world,
Craig. Oh, we are talking about Stefon Diggs today. Welcome to this Thursday episode, kind of a Wednesday bonus episode as well. But welcome to this episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this is one of those days where we are glad to be talking Texans with you guys. So thank you for stopping by. If this is your first time watching or listening, viewing, however, please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow on Twitter at Locked On Texans. And thank you to all of our returning listeners that may have heard what we opened up the show with a few days ago, talking about the possibility of Stefon Diggs after the Texans, created a bunch of cap space. Thank you to everybody coming back. We are looking at today, how does Diggs change the draft plans for the Houston Texans, his impact on this culture, and we're going to be looking at, I think Cody has a great conversation that he wants to bring, just the overall reaction to the news breaking. And what does that mean for Houston? I actually want to look at the on-field impact, so we're going to have a great first segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your Texans football analyst, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, and of course, your beat reporter, Texans Credential Media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. Your initial reaction to this trade news, take us away.
Man, let me just say kudos to General Manager Nick Caserio and head coach D'Amico Ryans, because John, first off, let me just say that I'm still in awe that the Texans got this deal done. But when I think about my initial reaction, I truly do believe that the Houston Texans got the best deal possible in order to improve their wide receiver union. I'm looking at it from two ways: the money aspect of things and what they had to give up in order to bring in a player like Stefon Diggs.
We have that right here. So the Texans and the Bills agreed to a trade for Stefon Diggs. The Texans will be sending a 2025 second-round pick back to Buffalo in the deal, with the Bills sending a 2025 fifth-rounder and a 2024 sixth-round pick back for Diggs. And also on top of that, the Buffalo Bills will take on, the Houston Texans will take on Diggs $19 million, which comes from his salary cap hit, $250,000 in workout bonus, and $255,000 in per game roster bonus. The Bills will carry over $30 million in dead money, and I think that kind of speaks to the fractured relationship with Diggs and that franchise. $30 million in dead money. You didn't get a lot back. This kind of feels like when Houston traded DeAndre Hopkins for David
Boy.
Johnson. Finally, some karma had to come back for the Texans in terms of getting a receiver. And if you remember, that year, Stefon Diggs was also traded to the Buffalo Bills. So it all comes back full circle.
Yeah, so no, let's not remember the bad anymore. But John, like I mentioned, man, I truly do believe that the Houston Texans definitely got the best deal possible. And I'm looking at it from two ways: the money aspect of things and what they had to give up. Because first off, let's take a look at the money. And I'm going to use Mike Evans, one wide receiver who was definitely rumored and had interest in joining the Houston Texans if things did not work out in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans, and think about it. This was a hometown discount. It was already rumored, it was already out there that Mike Evans definitely wanted to cash in during his final years in the NFL, because rightfully so, first ballot Hall of Famer. But Mike Evans rejoined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a 2-year deal worth $52 million, which means that in 2024, Mike Evans is projected to make $26 million. John, you just gave the projected upcoming salary for Stefon Diggs, $19 million, which means that by landing Diggs, the Houston Texans have saved somewhere in the ballpark to $7 to $8 million. Now, the biggest thing, what the Houston Texans had to give up in order to improve their wide receiver unit. For example, I'm going to go back to the failed pursuit of Keenan Allen, who was traded to the Chicago Bears for a 4th-round pick. According to our good friend Aaron Wilson, the Houston Texans had a deal on the table for a 2025 3rd-round pick, along with a pick swap of their choice. But as we know, the Los Angeles Chargers did not want to send Keenan Allen to the city of Houston to pair him alongside CJ Stroud, which means if the Houston Texans were desperate enough, they probably was going to have to move on from one, if not both, of their 2nd-round picks in order to acquire Keenan Allen. John, you just gave the package that the Houston Texans gave to the Bills, and look, they still have their top 2 2nd-round picks in this year's draft. Number 42 and 59.
I think when he was finalizing that deal, he had on a shiesty mask with an all-black Nike Tech suit and some black forces. Because he robbed him. And again, I think that does speak to the relationship between Buffalo and Diggs as well. Not to get off track, but
I was gonna say, man, like I just, first of all, just being in awe that the Houston Texans had an opportunity to get a player of Stefon Diggs' caliber. John, I know you're going to get into, what is he going to do for this offense, for CJ Stroud, for Bobby Sloyd. I know you're going to get into all that, but I just had to take a step back and say Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans did a damn good job not getting complacent, because a lot of us, and look, and I'm one of them. Well, maybe you don't have to, give up too much stuff, because you got Nico Collins, you got Tank Dell, but John, you always came back and said that's not enough. And then two, and most importantly, they made sure they went out and got the right deal that was right for them. John, I want to give you credit, because every time we talk about how can the Houston Texans improve their roster, you always say, you look at Nick Caserio's track record, he always tried to get the max value for a player, and I think he exceeded this value.
You know what, man? Thank you for that. I appreciate it, right?
My brother.
But I think, man, you know what? And the earlier part of Wednesday's show, right? Because this is kind of a double, but we ended off the show talking about how Houston can look clueless if basically the trade for Diggs never happens. Mm-hmm. None of this ever comes to fruition. A lot of the decisions that they made over the last week or so, maybe 10 days, don't make sense. And a couple of hours later, footing them off, right? Not necessarily saying that was going to happen, but we're happy to see this happen for this team, right? They needed it. And again, shout out to Sarge. Nick Caserio always had something up his sleeve, whether it was option A, option B, option C. He understood that, hey, I got to get some people in here that can create that separation and be a more dynamic wide receiver group. I want to talk about his impact on the field, right? First of all, for one, where does this move help rank this offense right now? I don't want to put a number on the ranking on this team in April, but the list of teams that comes to mind that on paper could be better than Houston, Detroit, maybe San Fran. You look at what they got going on up there with McCaffrey, Ayuk, and he's still on the roster. Debo and Kittle, right? I think Green Bay is up there. I think the LA Rams is up there. But right now, in April, on paper, this move, I think, legitimately pushes Houston to a top 10 offense. I mean, we're looking at CJ being in the offense similar to what he was in at Ohio State in 2021. Well, you had an offense that featured 2 1,000-yard receivers in Smith-Njigba and Garrett Wilson, an almost 1,000-yard receiver in Olave, and a 1,000-yard running back in Trey Henderson. As we look at Diggs coming off a 1,000-yard season, Nico Collins' career year, Tank Dell would have been a 1,000-yard receiver, kind of putting him and Olave in that same bracket if he would have never got hurt. But also adding Joe Mixon at running back. Also with the addition of Diggs, guys, Houston now has guys that can create separation at all 3 wide receiver first spots. I think Houston shouldn't look to use him for his deep ball threat that he had once in the past, but allow him to be more of a complete wide receiver that can open up your offense due to his ability to run every route that you in that tree that you want him running the route tree. But you have 3 players based off last season that can create separation for a team that has been looking for that, dating back to when, Cody? The combine, right?
Yes, sir.
Back-to-back days, Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, they came out and said, hey, listen, we need somebody that can get open. And I think when you look at what they now have in Diggs, Tank Dell averaged 2.9 yards of separation last year. Nico Collins averaged 3 yards of separation last year. And now with Diggs, 2.8 yards of separation last year. Oh, also, you got Dalton Schultz, who you brought back, sitting at 3.3 yards of separation last year. So when we talk about his impact, you're impacting the wide receiver group. You're impacting what Dalton Schultz can possibly be for this team now. You even look at Joe Mixon, who came from one prolific offense, Joe Burrow, Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, right? And now he's going to be featured in an offense that could have that spread style of offense and have those receivers be so good that they're going to force teams to not be in the box so much. And he's getting at with a better offensive line. Oh, yeah, this is what this deal does. And I think this team will be able to, again, truly spread the ball out to any different playmaker. Play calling will reflect it, Bobby Sloyd. We'll talk about that. By the way, Stefon Diggs was aligned in the slot on 35% of his routes last year. So you look at what him and Tank Dell and Nico, who was featured in a few slot snaps last year, just play calling, right? I think everybody right now is Bobby, how are you going to maximize these talents? And I got to tell you, because I saw what Stefon Diggs did for a struggling Josh Allen in the Buffalo Bills offense before he got there. Turned Josh Allen into a year in and year out MVP candidate, right? Now I cannot wait to see not only what he does for CJ Stroud, but what he does for Tank, what he does for Nico, and check this out. We are looking at an offense, all right. Now, where does that leave John Mechie? Oh my gosh.
I don't want to do it, man.
No, but in a positive way, now you look at John Mechie or Xavier Hutchinson potentially being your wide receiver 4, your wide receiver 5. And remember how I talked about how important it is to help bottom out the bottom of this wide receiver core. Now you got 2 guys that can come in year 2. Expectations or not, high expectations or not, they can perform at some type of level, and they're going to get better. So That's what Diggs does on field in terms of impact, man. It just everybody has an opportunity to eat a little bit more, and in some cases, a lot more. I'm going to say it right now, April 3rd. Right, I'm going to say it right now, a fully healthy season, which is what we're looking for and asking for. Right, knock on wood. We don't want anything to happen to the young man, but I'm looking at year 2, CJ Stroud. I'm looking for them 3 letters. MVP. That's all I gotta say. The on-field impact from this trade will be monumental. And now we got to look at Diggs' impact on the Texans' culture. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Don't go nowhere. More Diggs talk on Locked On Texans. Hey, did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Not only do we talk sports, but we like to talk the future, as Cody talked about Stefon Diggs possibly being the Houston Texan. The news that we break, a lot of that is fun and games, right? That's why you come to the show, but we do care about your actual future. And with Robinhood, they have an IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through the end of the month, April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap. 3% match. Robinhood gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information that is important. Investing involves a risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we talk about the impact of the culture, listen to this stat number, however you want to put it. I just want to give you guys an inside look at. I would also, if I want to call CJ MVP, if everything works out in the favor of the Texans, I'm going to also call Nick Caserio future general manager of the year, executive of the year. Look at what the Texans have been able to accomplish this offseason. The Texans are the first team in NFL history to acquire players coming off 1,000 yards, 1,000 rushing yards, receiving yards, rushing yards, and they have 2 10-sack players. When you look at Stefon Diggs from Buffalo last year was a 1K receiver. Joe Mixon last year was a 1K runner. Danielle Hunter last year was a 10K sack getter. Danico Autry last year was a 10K sack getter, right? Also, when I talk about the offseason, that's the 4 majors, right? Al Shire had a career year. Brought him in, right? Revamping that D tackle unit, right? Getting value, right? Again, I got killed for this in the comments. We'll talk about it later. Okuda. I like Okuda, right? What Nick Caserio has been able to do quietly for a lot of y'all, just quietly with that sweater vest and his kale salads, what he's been able to do has been nothing short of remarkable. But Cody, let's get it back to Stefon Diggs and his impact on the Texans culture. I think a lot of us need to look deeper when we had this conversation. But Cody, I want to give it to you.
Yeah, and that might be the one negative that a lot of people have in terms of Stefon Diggs coming to the Houston Texans. I remember a couple days ago, and we talked about the possibility of this move happening. I remember looking in the comment section and somebody said, Stefon Diggs is not coming to Houston because he is not, the culture type of guy that the Texans, have on their roster.
That's the comment I was talking about.
And look, to a certain extent, I actually agree with him because I was like, yeah, Stefon Diggs is still one of the best players at his position today. However, at this stage in his career, he's going to come with some baggage. However, I think it might be in everybody's best interest to at least try to break down into what was possible, what was going on at that time. Because look, Stefon Diggs, you know that he had a very weird breakup with the Minnesota Vikings. But Stefon Diggs, I know the one thing that I know about him from the outside looking in, from all the reports that I read, from just being a fan of his since 2015 when he entered the league as a 5th-round pick. The one thing that I've always saw in him, he's just a player that wants to win. And when you look at his time with the Minnesota Vikings, you know, he played with quarterbacks the likes of Teddy Bridgewater, Case Keenum. Remember when the Minnesota Miracle, when he was
Case
crying.
also tweeted today, welcome. It's good to be, get him back. Maybe third time's a charm to win a ring.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. But remember the Minnesota Miracle? He was crying. Can't wait to tell Stefon Diggs in the locker room. Look, I was crying too, but I was crying for a different reason than you. But then he ended up playing with Kirk Cousins. So he wants to get paid. Minnesota doesn't really want to pay him. They draft Justin Jefferson. They trade him to the Buffalo Bills. We have seen Stefon Diggs over the last 3 seasons lose in the playoffs to Kansas City time and time again in heartbreaking fashion. And it just got to that point where I think his will to win is part of the reason why he has had these bad breakups with the last 2 franchises that he has played with. He's going to come to the city of Houston with, depending on where you want to rank Josh Allen, but he's going to come to the city of Houston with a top 5 quarterback as of right now in CJ Stroud, plus John listeners and viewers. The one thing that we have been harping on ever since he got hired last January, at the start of February, I can't remember that. I think it was January 31st or February 1st, one of the two. DeMeco Ryans is a leader of men. Yes, and I think Coach DeMeco Ryans is going to be the perfect coach to allow Stefon Diggs to be Stefon Diggs, but at the same time, connect with him on a standpoint to where we will not see that disgruntled Stefon Diggs like we saw in Minnesota and in Buffalo. Because the one thing, John, you mentioned all of these players that have signed with the Houston Texans. The one thing that a lot of these players have in common, from the players that they brought in this year to the players that they brought in last year, starting with, I think, Dalton Schultz, all of these guys wanted to play for Coach DeMeco Ryans, and I'm pretty sure Stefon Diggs is going to have that same excitement thinking about, man, I have a coach who literally knows what I'm going through just on a player human element standpoint in the NFL.
And I'm looking this up right now because I'm just trying to match the timeline of this. When was Stefon Diggs traded to Buffalo?
2020. March or April of 2020. Because like you said, it was around that time with you know who got traded for I don't even know what you want to call it.
So let's look at it like this, though, right? Because we're now in 2024. 4 seasons have passed since then. After the second year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after the second year that he got there, you know who left? Brian Daboll. And when you look at Brian Daboll leaving, and we're going to credit a lot to Stefon Diggs and him helping Josh Allen grow. But I think Daboll played a huge part in that, knowing how to utilize Diggs with the quarterback he had and that offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once Daboll left, I think we saw a lot of confusion on offense, right? This past season, they fired their OC, I think within the first 6 or 7 games or something like that. And I think that confusion on offense for the past 2 seasons is what really hurt the relationship between Diggs, Allen. And if that relationship is fractured with my franchise quarterback, then you got to know the front office guys are like, we cannot have this. This is our darling. This is the guy we paid the big money to, right? We can't have that type of toxicity around our young quarterback. And I think that's where it really started to boil over. So when I look at the confusion on offense, once again, Dayball leaves in 2022. He goes to New York. Stefon gets there in 2020. Those first 2 years, we're looking at Diggs and Allen, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, this is probably the best duo in the NFL, right? In terms of quarterback, if not 1A, 2, whatever, but definitely top 3 to 5. Dayball leaves, and we're starting to see Josh Allen kind of revert back to some of the things that we saw before the arrival of Stefon Diggs and before the implementation of that offense with Diggs and Dayball as the offensive coordinator, play caller. Once that was fractured, again, we saw all hell break loose, sideline tweets, whatever you want to call it. Now, on the flip side, why I think it'll be different in Houston, right? And it won't be how Diggs impacts the Texans culture. I think Diggs is going to come in year 2 of the swarm Texans culture, how can they impact, like you mentioned, Diggs? You're looking at year 2 of Bobby and CJ already working together in an offense that was already successful and a quarterback that was already taking care of the ball before the arrival of this star receiver. So adding him to the mix, I put it like this. I saw CJ win with Nico and Tank. I didn't see Josh Allen win without Diggs. So I don't see the restraints on a quarterback without a receiver like Diggs. I already saw CJ blossom and have again, rookie of the year season, at one point MVP type of season. I don't think we'll see the past 2 seasons of Diggs because he's going to be walking back into a situation where he thrived in the first 2 years in Buffalo. A system that is working, a system that is in place, and a system that is friendly and favorable to not only my strengths, but the strengths of my quarterback. And that's what I'm getting at. I think it's going to be opposite the other way around. We're going to see the Texans culture rub off on Diggs, and we won't see Diggs rub off on the Texans culture. And hey, if Diggs doesn't, come in and do what he needs to do, the Texans can move on from him this year. I don't think they will. That's a possibility. And after this year, he'll rank 15th among wide receivers in terms of money, so that's a win for Houston. But honestly, I'm just looking at this, a little bit deeper and thinking to myself, what if the issue that was caused that started to fracture this was just the instability of that offense, that they were clicking when everything was good. And when everything went down, when Daboll left and they brought in a new offensive coordinator and you saw Josh Allen revert back to some of his old ways, we know how receivers are. Receivers going to be who they are every day, every year, every decade, every class. They want the ball, but they want to win. Those are probably some of the most competitive players on that roster. They're going to be probably the loudest players on that roster in terms of how they want to win. And I think it just got rocky to the point where Diggs was like, I can't win this way. We're not going to win with my quarterback leading the league since he came into the league in turnovers. However, in year 1, 5 interceptions last year, I think 7 total turnovers. CJ has never been a guy to give the ball away. It works. It works here in Houston the way it didn't work in Buffalo, at least asterisk in the first year. And I think going into year 2, I know I'm talking a lot, but I think going into year 2 with already a foundation will help ease the transition for Stefon Diggs. Hey, man, listen, y'all better hurry up and get some of these tickets for the Houston Texans. I don't know if you want to now be a season ticket holder or what, but if you can't get the season tickets holder spot right secured and you're a game-by-game type of person, check out Game Time, who is also now authorized as a ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. That's right. You want to catch Astros or whatever baseball team in your area, they make getting tickets even easier and faster. Prices on Game Time, the app, actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and tickets in general. Easy app, customize your spot, and just watch the rest roll in, right? They also have the zone deals and the flash deals. You don't want to miss out on this. Oh, my gosh, you don't want to miss out on this. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use code Locked On LOCKED for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time, the app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also, I want to let you guys know about eBay Motor. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for a winning championship team is also the formula to what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, or all three, eBay Motors has you covered with over $122 million, with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Motors, guarantee fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, we'll be talking about Stefon throughout this week. We had a lot of talk time already, and I think we can continue this conversation as well, right? But just how does Diggs change the Texans' draft plans?
I don't know where they go, to be honest with you. Plain and simple. At the start,
we had that Edgar Cooper conversation,
yeah,
and now I think that makes sense.
And you might as well just go ahead and take him at 42. Because, like, once again, to go back to the NFL Combine, when myself, Sarge, Jonathan Alexander, all of us who were there, when we asked D'Amico and Nick Caserio, hey, what do you think about this position? How do you want to go about improving your roster? Matter of fact, even further back, and remember, John, we just had this conversation with Cole Thompson a couple days ago. Like, ever since the end of the 2023 season, D'Amico and Nick Caserio has talked about upgrading at wide receiver, running back, the D-line, and cornerback. We are still, about 2.5 weeks away from the draft, and they have already did a damn good job at filling out those positions. And like I mentioned, to bring it back to my original point when I said that the Texans got the best deal possible to upgrade their position group, they had an opportunity to trade for a freaking Stefon Diggs without giving up pick number 42 or what is it, 58, 59?
59 or 86.
Or 86. So they still have their top 3 selections. So at this point, John, I'm like, look, now if I'm starting to think, okay, top priority, linebacker, because when we talked about this same topic on yesterday, I said, I think the number one thing is, how do you feel about whether or not Henry T could take that second year jump? Edgerrin Cooper, you and I have been beating on the table for a safety, at least one that could compete with Petrie and Ward for starting purposes. At this point, I truly don't know how to answer or what is going to be the ideal situation entering the draft.
Hey, that's so real. That's so real. I don't know. I don't know. You caught me red-handed,
man.
I agree, but I will say I think it'll be on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the 3 positions that it will be is linebacker, safety, or cornerback. And I would take it a step further and say maybe BPA, best player available at 42, right? I mean, that's probably why you give yourself an opportunity to get there, because 42 is a good spot to pick, especially since you just landed Stefon Diggs, right? Maybe Sweat. I saw a mock where Newton will be there. I'm not sure.
I don't think Sweat landed a 42.
I think Sweat would be there. I don't think Murphy would be there. I'm not
Murphy
sure
definitely
Newton
not.
would be there. Yeah, I think the cornerback position right now is still a position that it's like, okay, you got Okuda, but the rest of these guys, Henderson and whoever else, can you really bank on them to be impactful players? And again, man, like Kamari Kitchens could be available, safety out of Miami, who may be one of the best single high deep safeties in this draft, and it's not a deep class, but Kitchens will be there. Newbin will be there, Tyler Newbin out of Minnesota. So for Houston, I think they will be in the best position to say, we're going to pick the best player available at the position that we need the most help at. All right. We're going to continue Diggs Talk this week. It's going to be fun. But thank y'all for listening to this episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Do us a favor. Subscribe, like, and comment. Tell a friend, to phone a friend, to text a friend, to email a friend to listen to this podcast and subscribe as well. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. The last of the greats. We just getting started. Draft is 2 weeks away, baby, and we gonna have a lot to talk about.
Oh man. And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Texans fans, man, y'all deserve this, man. We've been covering this team basically since the start of the downfall, and you guys have went through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of what the heck, a lot of ugly, bad football, ugly play on both sides of the ball. Like, you guys, as a reporter, covering y'all favorite team, like from the bottom of my heart, you guys deserve this. And if everything works out, the next 3 to 5 years, something special is definitely going to happen here in the city of Houston, man. Like, I'm so happy for y'all.
I never thought I'd say this. And once I know my boy Drew hears this, I'm going to get the call, but I'm jealous. As I take my Texan hat off and put my Patriot fandom hat on, I am jealous, but I wouldn't want this for any other fan base and city outside of the Houston Texans fans. So until tomorrow, when we back balling and parlaying, peace.